The chamber was cold, too cold for a human body. His breath turned to mist as he exhaled, the air sharp in his lungs. The room was silent except for the humming of strange alien machines. The human sat strapped to a chair, metallic bands locking his wrists and ankles so tight he could barely move a finger. Blue lights traced symbols on the walls, symbols he could not understand. Every surface glowed with an unnatural energy, like the place itself was alive. His heart raced faster with each second. He pulled against the restraints, but they did not move. It felt like being trapped inside an ice cave made of steel. Behind the thick glass in front of him, alien figures watched. Their bodies were tall, thin, with skin that shifted color in the light. Their large eyes never blinked, always fixed on him, studying every move like he was an insect. One door slid open with a hiss, and she walked in. She was different from the others, smaller, younger, and her skin carried a softer glow. Her long hair moved like strands of liquid silver, and her eyes seemed almost human in their expression. She wore a white robe with strange patterns stitched across the chest. In her hands, she carried tools, long, sharp, and humming with energy. The human's breath caught in his throat. She stopped a step away from him and tilted her head, her gaze curious yet calm. Then, in a voice low and careful, she spoke words that shook him to the core. "Relax, human. This won't hurt." The words were clear. English. He could not understand how she knew his language, but hearing it made his skin crawl. Her tone was gentle, but the meaning was not comforting. Something about the way she said it made his blood run colder. She lifted one of the tools. A bright needle of light extended from its tip. The humming grew louder, and the glow reflected in her eyes. His muscles tensed, fighting against the restraints. "What are you going to do to me?" he demanded, but she only gave him a look that seemed almost apologetic. From the observation room, the other aliens shifted, whispering in a language he could not follow. Their voices sounded like grinding stone mixed with the hiss of steam. The girl nodded once as if receiving a command. She turned back to him and brought the tool closer. He tried to jerk his head away, but the band around his neck held him firm. The light touched his chest. No cut, no blood, only a strange vibration that spread through his skin like fire and ice mixed together. His body arched against the chair, his teeth grinding as the sensation moved deeper. He expected pain, unbearable pain, but it was not pain. It was something worse, something that changed him from the inside. The girl's hands trembled for a moment. Her eyes flicked to the glass where the others watched, then back to him. She leaned closer, and her lips moved silently. At first, he thought it was more alien language, but then he realized she was whispering in broken English again, too soft for the others to hear. "Survive." His heart thudded so hard he thought it would burst. Survive? Did she mean this procedure was meant to kill him? The heat in his chest spread to his arms, his veins glowing faintly beneath the skin. His breaths came faster, each one rough and ragged. Something inside him was changing, reshaping, as though his very blood was no longer his own. The machines around him beeped and flashed. Alarms chirped, and the aliens behind the glass leaned forward. One of them slammed a clawed hand on the console, barking orders in their harsh tongue. The girl pressed the tool harder against him, pretending to follow their command, but her hand angled differently now, away from his heart. He realized she was faking part of it, hiding what she was really doing. The glow in his veins grew brighter, spreading down to his hands. His fingers twitched against the metal restraints. He felt strength rising, unnatural but powerful. He pulled again at the band around his wrist, and for the first time, the metal groaned. His eyes widened. That should not have been possible. The girl's face tightened. Her eyes flicked to the guards beyond the door, then back to him. For the first time, he saw fear in her. Not fear of him, but fear for him. She was not here to hurt him, at least not in the way the others wanted. He looked back at the glass. The tall aliens pressed closer, their unblinking eyes wide with hunger and expectation. He realized then that he was not just a prisoner. He was their experiment, and whatever this procedure was, it had never been meant to heal. The chamber grew colder, but the heat in his body rose higher. The clash of ice and fire inside him made his head spin. The restraints trembled under his grip, and he felt a terrible truth settling in his chest. If he did not break free soon, the experiment would be finished, and there would be no him left to save. The alien girl lowered her tool at last, her hand brushing against his arm like an accident. But her touch was deliberate, soft, urgent. In that tiny moment, her eyes met his, and he understood what she wanted him to do. The heat in his chest did not fade when the tool pulled back. Instead, it grew heavier, like molten fire pressing against his ribs. His pulse hammered in his ears, each beat louder than the hum of the machines. He clenched his jaw, refusing to cry out, though every nerve in his body begged for release. The light inside his veins moved again, this time sharper, burning its way down his arms until his fingers curled without command. The girl's hands were steady now, her earlier tremble gone, as if she had accepted what she was doing. She raised another tool, shaped like a claw of glass, and it unfolded with a crackle of white sparks. The moment it touched his skin, he gasped. The energy surged deeper, not slicing flesh, but weaving through muscle, bone, and blood. He could feel it, like invisible threads knitting into his body, rewriting something beyond his control. His throat worked, words torn from him. What are you doing to me?" His voice was hoarse, weak. She did not answer, only leaned closer, her silver hair brushing against his arm as she guided the tool across his chest. Her expression betrayed nothing, but her eyes flickered with something he recognized: conflict. She was fighting two sides, one he could not see. From the other side of the glass, the watchers shifted uneasily. They spoke in their harsh, metallic language, commands sharp and impatient. One of them pointed directly at his chest, and another tapped furiously at a console. A new sound filled the chamber, a rising drone that made his skull ache. The girl tightened her grip on the tool, forcing the energy deeper, and he cried out, his body jerking against the chair. The restraints groaned, but held. Then it happened. His heart skipped, just one beat, but enough to freeze his breath. The next came harder, stronger, shaking his chest. A ripple of light spread across his skin, faint but real. His veins glowed brighter, mapping themselves beneath the surface like rivers of fire. He stared in horror at his own body, no longer certain if it was still his. The girl leaned closer, her lips barely moving. "It changes you," she whispered so softly that even he wondered if he imagined it. Her tone carried no threat, only warning. He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. He wanted to demand answers, but his voice failed. The energy pulsed again, spreading now to his legs. His toes curled inside the restraints, strength rushing into muscles that had been drained by cold moments ago. He tested his ankle cuffs and felt them strain, metal biting into his skin. It was impossible, but the strength inside him was real, undeniable. The machines recorded every shift, every change. Symbols flashed across the walls, faster and faster. The watchers pressed closer to the glass, their eyes gleaming. They were excited, hungry. He realized they had waited for this reaction, this transformation. He was the first to survive this far. That truth chilled him more than the freezing chamber. The girl's eyes darted toward the glass, then back at him. She lowered the tool, pretending to adjust it, but her fingers brushed his wrist. A spark passed between them, a shock that wasn't just energy but intention. He knew then she was not simply a scientist. She was a prisoner too, bound by orders. And somewhere deep inside, she wanted him to fight. Another wave struck him, harder than before. His body convulsed, and the restraints screamed under the pressure of his strength. He forced air into his lungs, sweat freezing on his skin. The fire inside him battled the ice of the chamber, and for a moment he thought he might burst apart. Yet beneath the terror, something else stirred. Power. She looked at him again, and this time her eyes widened. His veins were glowing so bright they lit the room around him. She pressed her lips together, hiding any sign from the others, but her fingers trembled as she adjusted the device once more. He could not move, not yet. But he knew the truth now. This was not a cure, not a healing. It was a forging. They were turning him into something else, something that should not exist. And the worst part was the question clawing at the back of his mind. Was he still human, or had they already stolen that from him? The glow in his veins dimmed for a moment, but the fire inside remained, burning low like hidden embers. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as he stared at the girl. She had stopped moving the tool, holding it above him as though afraid of what she might unleash next. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved, and in that silence, he saw it clearly, the secret in her eyes. She was not like the others behind the glass. Their stares were cold, unblinking, filled with greed for results, but hers carried a shadow of fear, and something else he had not seen since his capture, pity. Her lips parted as though she wanted to speak, but she closed them quickly when one of the watchers slammed a clawed hand against the glass. The machine above his head whirred louder, its arms shifting, preparing the next step. He could see sharp extensions forming at the tips, glowing with a blinding white. The hum drilled into his skull, and he clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. The watchers barked their commands again, forcing the girl to continue. She pressed the device against his shoulder, but this time, when she leaned close, her whisper carried clear words. "Survive," she said again, almost desperate. The words struck him like lightning. Survive. That single word carried the weight of warning, a truth buried under the performance she was forced to play. He followed her eyes, noticing the quick flicker of her gaze, not toward the glass this time, but toward his restraints. She had angled the device in such a way that its energy brushed not only his skin, but also the metal around his wrist. The band vibrated, faint cracks forming where none should exist. His pulse spiked. She was helping him. She could not show it, but she was opening a path. He tightened his grip, forcing his hand against the weakened metal. The band creaked, a low sound lost beneath the machine's roar. He nearly smiled, though his lips were too dry to curve. The watchers did not notice yet, their attention locked on the readings flashing across the walls. They leaned closer to the glass, their voices rising, eager. He understood why. They wanted this. They wanted to see what a human body could endure, what it could become when torn apart and stitched with alien energy. To them, he was not a man. He was an experiment. The girl shifted the device again, drawing a line of glowing heat across his collarbone. He hissed, his body jerking as the energy sank deeper. It was not pain in the normal sense. It was worse, a tearing and rebuilding at once, as though every cell was being burned down and reborn. He gritted his teeth until blood filled his mouth. His vision blurred, but he kept his focus on her eyes. When the watchers turned away for a moment, she mouthed another word. Soon. The fire spread through his chest again, surging harder, nearly breaking his control. His body wanted to lash out, to break free, to destroy the chair holding him down. He swallowed the scream rising in his throat and forced himself to wait. If he moved too early, if he revealed what she was doing, they would stop her. And then he would never leave this chamber alive. His head sagged forward, sweat dripping down his face. Through the haze of pain, he realized something frightening. The energy inside him was not only changing his body, it was listening. When he pushed against the restraints, the fire surged, feeding his strength. When he fought it, the glow dimmed, almost calm. It was not just forced into him, it was merging with him, waiting for his choice. The girl lowered the tool once more, brushing it near his chest. Her lips moved without sound this time, but he understood. Hold on. He drew in a shaky breath, his fists clenching tight. The band around his wrist cracked again. Just a hairline fracture, but enough to promise what was coming. He raised his eyes to the glass, meeting the unblinking stares of his captors. They smiled in their alien way, certain of their victory. They had no idea he was already planning how to shatter their entire experiment. The alarms came without warning, a shrill wail that rattled the glass walls and sent red lights spinning across the chamber. The watchers leapt to their feet, shouting orders in their grinding language. Panels flickered, streams of alien symbols racing across the displays. The machine above his head jerked and sputtered, energy sparking wildly, as though it could no longer contain what it had created. The girl did not hesitate. While the aliens behind the glass scrambled, she pressed the tool hard against his restraints, sending a surge of light through the metal. With a sharp crack, the band around his wrist split open. The sound was buried beneath the alarms, unnoticed by the others. She moved quickly to his other arm, her silver hair flying into her face as she worked. The heat inside him answered instantly. The fire that had been crawling under his skin erupted like a storm, filling his veins with power that begged to be unleashed. His fingers flexed freely for the first time, and when the band on his other wrist shattered, the chair groaned under his movements. He could hardly believe the strength flooding his muscles. One of the watchers finally noticed. A clawed hand pointed directly at him, and the chamber door hissed open. Two guards stormed in, taller than him by a head, armored in plates that gleamed like obsidian. Energy rifles buzzed to life in their hands. "Stay down," the girl hissed, but it was already too late. The guards raised their weapons, and instinct took over. He tore at the last restraint with his bare hand. The metal bent like soft wire, snapping apart with a sound that echoed through the chamber. The aliens froze in shock, their rifles wavering for just a moment too long. His fist collided with the first guard's chest, and the alien flew backward as if struck by a cannon, slamming into the wall with a sickening crunch. The second fired, a beam of searing energy flashing across the room. It grazed his shoulder, the heat biting into his flesh, but the fire inside him roared in response, dulling the pain almost instantly. He grabbed the rifle, twisted it free, and drove the butt into the alien's face. The guard crumpled. The girl stood frozen, staring at him as if she could not believe what she was seeing. Her lips parted, but no words came. He looked at his hands, glowing faintly, the fire burning steady and controlled. It terrified him, yet it felt natural. The watchers behind the glass slammed their fists on the controls, the chamber shaking as new commands lit up across the machines. More guards would come. He knew it. The girl snapped out of her shock and rushed to his side. "We must go," she whispered urgently, tugging at his arm. Her voice was sharp now, filled with urgency instead of calm. He glanced once at the fallen guards, then at the door. Beyond it lay endless corridors, more soldiers, more traps, but staying meant death, or worse, capture again. He tightened his grip on the stolen rifle, the weight solid and real in his hands. "Which way?" he asked, his voice low but steady. She pointed to the far side, where a smaller door pulsed faintly with green light. "There, hidden passage. Hurry." Together they ran, boots pounding against the metal floor. The alarms wailed louder, echoing down the hall. He could hear the thunder of heavy steps approaching, the enemy closing in. His heart pounded in rhythm with the fire inside him, both screaming the same truth. This was no longer about surviving the experiment. This was escape. And for the first time since the cold chamber swallowed him, he believed he might have a chance. The corridor twisted like a maze, its walls glowing with shifting lines of alien script that pulsed red in rhythm with the alarms. Every step echoed. Every breath seemed too loud in the silence between warning sirens. She ran ahead, her robe fluttering behind her, silver hair catching flashes of the emergency lights. He followed close, the stolen rifle heavy in his hands, the fire in his veins urging him forward faster than his legs could carry. Behind them came the sound of pursuit. Clattering boots, alien voices barking commands, weapons charging with sharp metallic whines. The sound grew louder, bouncing off the walls. They were gaining. She darted into a side passage, pressing her hand against a glowing panel. The wall slid open to reveal a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. She gestured frantically. "Inside now." He hesitated only a second before stepping in. The door ceiling shut behind them. Darkness swallowed the space, broken only by thin blue lines running along the floor. The air smelled stale, untouched by movement for years. He could still hear the guards rushing past outside, their heavy steps fading. He leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Where does this lead?" Her voice came soft but urgent. "Maintenance shafts. Not on their maps anymore. If we move fast, we reach the outer ring before they cut us off." Outer ring. He didn't know what that meant, but it was better than the chamber. Better than going back. They moved quickly through the tunnel, their footsteps muffled by dust. Every few meters, vents above hissed with bursts of cold air that prickled his skin. The silence between them grew heavy, filled only with the hum of unseen machines. Finally, he broke it. "Why are you helping me?" She stopped, her back to him, her hand pressed to another panel that flickered uncertainly. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, without turning, she whispered, "Because you are not supposed to live, and yet you do." The panel slid open and pale light spilled into the tunnel. He blinked, adjusting as they stepped into a larger corridor lined with tanks, transparent cylinders filled with strange liquid. At first he thought they were empty, but then his stomach twisted. Inside floated shapes, human shapes, bodies suspended in silence, pale and still, wires running from their limbs into the machines. Some were incomplete, arms missing, torsos split open. Others looked whole, but their faces were blank, empty, as if life had been erased. His hands tightened around the rifle. She lowered her eyes. Failed. He forced himself to look away. Every tank was another reminder. He was not the first. He was simply the only one who hadn't died yet. The girl stepped close, her voice almost trembling. They told me I was saving lives, that I was healing. I believed them. But then I saw this. She motioned to the tanks. Now I cannot stop it alone. Only you can. His chest tightened. The fire in his veins pulsed again, angry, restless. He understood then. He was not just an experiment. He was proof. Proof of what humans could become. Proof of what the aliens wanted to create. And if they succeeded, humanity itself would never be safe again. A crash behind them shattered the moment. The far door burst open, guards pouring in with weapons raised. Their armor glowed under the harsh lights, rifles humming as they took aim. He didn't think. The fire inside surged, guiding his hands. He leveled the rifle, pulled the trigger, and a beam of searing light tore through the nearest guard, throwing him back into the wall. The others shouted, spreading out, firing wildly. Energy bolts scorched the floor, sparks flying. The girl grabbed his arm and pulled him behind one of the tanks as the beams sliced past. Liquid inside sloshed violently, the pale shapes floating lifelessly in their prison. He pressed his back against the glass, gripping the rifle tighter. She leaned close, her breath fast. We cannot fight them all. We must move. His jaw tightened. He looked at the tanks, at the failed experiments, staring blankly through the liquid. The fire in his chest roared, telling him he could fight, that he had the strength to tear them all apart. But another part of him knew she was right. If he died here, it would mean nothing. He met her eyes, nodded once, and together they ran again, deeper into the maze, with death following close behind. They stumbled into a chamber that looked older than the rest of the facility, its walls cracked, wires hanging loose from the ceiling like vines in a dead forest. The alarms were muffled here, replaced by a low hum that pulsed through the floor. Strange pods lined the walls, each one shaped like a coffin, their glass darkened with age. Some flickered faintly, others were shattered, spilling dried fluid across the ground. She slowed, her breathing uneven, her hands trembling as she touched one of the pods. This is where it began, she whispered, her voice thick with something between guilt and fear. He looked closer. Inside the glass lay shapes again, but not human this time. Alien forms, twisted and broken, their bodies scarred by the same glowing lines he had seen running through his own skin. Some looked as if they had burned alive, others as if they had simply withered away. They tried with their own kind first, she said, her silver eyes fixed on the dead within the pods. None survived. Then they turned to yours. His chest tightened. He thought of the tanks they had passed, the empty faces of the humans before him. He swallowed hard, the fire in his veins growing hotter with each realization. And me? He asked. Her gaze met his, unsteady. You are the first who lived. The words echoed inside him like a death sentence. First who lived. That meant he wasn't their last. If he could survive, they would keep trying until they had an army. He clenched his fists, the glow in his veins flaring. The thought of humanity chained, broken, remade into weapons. It burned hotter than the fire coursing through him. A deep vibration shook the floor, and he staggered. The girl's eyes widened, and she pulled him away from the pods. They are locking down this section. We must move now. Before he could reply, the wall at the far end split open, revealing a towering figure. This alien was unlike the Thin Watchers. Its frame was massive, armored in black plating that shimmered with faint energy. Its eyes glowed with pale light, and in its hands was a weapon longer than his body. The girl froze, whispering under her breath, "Enforcer." The creature stepped forward, each movement heavy, deliberate. Its voice thundered, metallic and deep. The words were alien, but the meaning was clear enough. None would leave alive. His grip on the rifle tightened, but before he could raise it, the enforcer slammed its weapon into the ground. A wave of energy exploded outward, knocking him back against the wall. His ribs ached, and the rifle skidded across the floor. The girl cried out, shielding her face as sparks rained down. The fire inside him surged again, wild and uncontainable. His vision blurred at the edges, the glow in his veins spreading across his chest like lightning. He pushed himself up, muscles trembling with strength that felt both his and not his. The enforcer raised its weapon to strike again. Instinct took control. He lunged forward barehanded, catching the weapon mid-swing. To his shock, his grip held. Energy scorched his palms, but he did not let go. He twisted, the weapon screeching against the floor, and for the first time the enforcer faltered. The girl stared at him, her eyes wide, hope flashing through her fear. She shouted, "It listens to you. Use it!" He didn't fully understand, but he knew what she meant. The fire wasn't random anymore. It was waiting, responding. He clenched his teeth, drew on the heat rushing through his veins, and roared as he ripped the weapon from the enforcer's hands. The chamber shook with the force. The alien staggered back, stunned. For the first time, he saw something like fear in its glowing eyes. He stood tall, the stolen weapon humming in his grip, his body alight with energy. He had no training, no plan, but he had power. More than that, he had a choice. The girl's voice cut through the chaos, soft but certain. If you fight them here, you will never leave. You must decide, freedom or revenge. Her words carved into him like blades. Freedom meant escape. Revenge meant staying, fighting until he was consumed. The fire inside him pulsed, impatient for his answer. The enforcer steadied itself, metal plates shifting with a grinding roar as it prepared to strike again. The chamber's red lights flashed faster, shadows dancing across the broken pods, the dead staring through glass as silent witnesses. His chest heaved with every breath, the fire inside him burning hotter, threatening to spill out. The girl's words echoed in his skull. Freedom or revenge. The enforcer lunged forward, raising both arms to crush him. He did not step back. He swung the stolen weapon, energy crackling down its length, and the clash sent a shockwave that shattered nearby glass. The force flung him to one side and the enforcer to the other, the floor splitting beneath their weight. Dust and sparks filled the air. She rushed toward him, grabbing his arm, pulling hard. "We cannot win here. They will bring more. You are not ready." His eyes locked on the enforcer, already rising again, its glow brighter, angrier. His veins blazed, his body screaming to fight, to unleash everything and tear it apart. But then he saw her face, pale, desperate, not for herself but for him. With a ragged breath, he lowered the weapon. He grabbed her hand, their fingers locking, and ran. Together they darted through a side passage as the enforcer roared, its voice shaking the walls. Blasts of energy tore through the corridor behind them, each one close enough to scorch their skin, but they kept running. The fire in him giving speed where his body should have failed. The tunnel opened into a wide bay filled with towering gates. Beyond them lay the black void of space, stars glittering like cold fire. Docked ships hummed with life, their sleek frames glimmering under harsh lights. Dozens of guards turned as alarms screamed, weapons rising to block their path. He didn't slow. The fire inside him roared like a beast unleashed, surging into his arms, his legs, his voice. He tore through the first line of soldiers, ripping rifles from their hands, slamming bodies into walls with strength he no longer questioned. Each strike fed the blaze, but each strike also drained him, his vision tunneling. The girl moved like his shadow, guiding him through the chaos. She shouted directions, slammed control panels, opened paths he never would have found. Together they cut through the swarm, two against many, until at last the docking gate loomed before them. A final squad blocked the ramp, rifles glowing with lethal energy. His knees buckled, his strength nearly gone. The fire within him sputtered, raging but unstable. The girl stepped in front of him, arms spread wide, her voice ringing with defiance. She shouted in her own language, words sharp and burning with command. The guards hesitated, confused, torn between obedience and doubt. It was enough. Enough. With the last of his strength, he surged forward, grabbing her hand once more. They broke through the line, stumbling up the ramp as bolts of energy ripped past them. Inside the ship, she slammed the panel, and the hatch sealed shut. Engines roared to life. The vessel trembled, then tore free from the docking bay, leaving behind fire, alarms, and the unblinking gaze of the enforcer watching them vanish into the stars. He collapsed against the wall, every muscle burning, his body still glowing faintly beneath the skin. She knelt beside him, her hands pressed to his chest, her voice low and steady. "You are alive. You chose to live." His breath came in ragged gasps, but he forced a smile, for now. Outside, the stars stretched endless and cold, but for the first time, he felt something else burning hotter than the fire in his veins, the beginning of a war. And this time, he would not be their experiment. He would be their enemy.